Welcome to episode 174 of the Half Point Per Podcast. How did I know that was going to happen the first time on, on this new software? I'm Evan Riggs, joined by my co-host, Dalton Willie. Dalton, after a half hour of watching me struggle through technical difficulties, how are you doing tonight? We eventually got there. Took a little longer than I want. For any of you who listened last week, you know that StreamYard I said was a little bit different on the back end, which is what we used to use. The biggest difference is we had like no drops and no ability to use any of the video drops. And I mean, if you've watched or listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know we like to mix those in here and there. So we're trying something different. We'll see how this goes. Bear with us through any technical difficulties that we may have. But with that said, Dalton, we've got a super fun one today. I mean, we're it feels both like we shouldn't be to this point yet, but also like the season needed to start a month ago because I'm just so tired of the Twitter discourse already and it's mid-August. But we're to sleepers, we're to breakouts, so we're really to kind of the meat of the draft season, past the off season, past all of those off season topics that maybe we discussed a little bit in the spring. But before we even get there, a couple of news items real quick I wanted to get to. Rashee Rice in particular, I thought would be good for us both to talk about for obvious reasons. So he is expected to have his disciplinary hearing with the NFL on Tuesday, September 30th. That is per Adam Schefter. What that means is if things proceed like that, he will probably play the first 4 weeks of the season, and then from there we'll just see. I think the Deshaun Watson case is the only other one where this exact process has happened. That's not because this case is necessarily similar to that one. It's because there was a disagreement on I think the NFLPA and commissioner on length of suspension. So that's why we're going to the third party. The reason why this matters probably for fantasy, people were planning on, okay, I might not have Rashee Rice for the first 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. Now it could be weeks 5 through 10. The Chiefs have a bye week in week 10, but also the NFL and the NFLPA could come to an agreement still in the days leading up to September 30th, and the suspension could still start at any time. All of that to say this is a very fluid situation. We may know by the time you're drafting, and we may know, at the end of September. So, Dalton, how are you handling this? How are you thinking about Rashee Rice as a fantasy draft asset now? Mm-hmm.
Situation for a while. As far as Rashee Rice goes, I think I had him as a top 20 wide receiver in my rankings. Uh, going to be moving him down. I mean, we already expected it, but we weren't real sure. But with it coming kind of in bye week madness, and then there's still this lack of certainty of even if he gets charged September 30th, like we still don't know if the case is going to get furloughed and they're going to do it later down the line, and we're just getting really close to fantasy playoffs and championships that you have to take a hit on him, and it's going to be even worse for you if it does happen later in the season and he has the season a lot of people are expecting out of him with some top 15 production.
I realized about a minute, maybe 30 seconds into you talking that your audio wasn't there on the YouTube. So got that figured out. Anybody who's watching this back on the YouTube, you're seeing Dalton talk and no noise for about a minute 30 seconds. He talked about a little bit of the Deshaun Watson side of things. I did also cover that a little bit leading up to it, so you didn't miss much. The long and short of it. However, I think the Dalton's intro talking about the IT problems is now forever lost.
I'm being silenced by my own co-host.
But I agree with you that he does have to take a little bit of a hit fantasy wise just because of the uncertainty of when a suspension were to happen. Because if it does happen, let's say not until after September 30th, and like you said, maybe it is 6 weeks. Like we're getting pretty close to the fantasy playoffs at that point, especially with the Chiefs bye. Um, and you probably have to just like I can't imagine too many situations where you have Rashee Rice, you've been waiting on him, and you don't feel like you have to just throw him back into your starting lineup unless you've really traded for a monster team. And that's just an uncomfortable situation to be in, to have a guy that you haven't seen play for over a month, if that does happen, and you have to throw him back in. So I think from a fantasy perspective, the far preferred outcome was to have him miss the first month of the season. From a Chiefs perspective, I actually think this might be the preferred outcome as long as it is only 4 or 6 games and not a longer suspension, because then you get like the real life version of what I just talked about with the fantasy playoffs, where kind of like Hollywood Brown last year, where it's like he comes back 2 weeks before the playoffs. Obviously, we're still going to play him, but he's just not really integrated into the offense. But the Chiefs have a very tough schedule. The first month, their schedule's also pretty hard after that too. It's just a tough schedule really for the Chiefs. But at the very beginning of the season, they open up against the Chargers in Brazil. They play the Eagles, defending champs, week 2 at home. They play the Giants, who not a good team, but a fantastic pass rush. Would be nice to have Rashee Rice to get some yak probably in that game, as opposed to having to have Mahomes kind of stand in there with that pass rush. And then I am forgetting who they play week 4, but I'm sure it's probably it's the Ravens. The Ravens week 4.
Yeah, I've seen some schedule bros out there being like, well, actually, he's missing an easier part of the season because they get the Raiders and the Jacksonville Jaguars. The whole schedule for the Chiefs is tough.
Yeah.
They were the first place team in the division. The matchup this year is with the North. Like there are going to be few and far between easy games for the Chiefs, and I wouldn't suck yourself into thinking that like Rashee Rice's value is dependent on the schedule they play. That's some wide receiver 52 analysis and not wide receiver top 24.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, Rashee Rice is far and above that sort of thing really mattering for him. So, okay, I think we've covered it. Obviously, we will continue to follow any news as it comes with that. I mean, for fantasy, it sure would be nice to have any idea. Even if we hear more concrete information about the amount of games, I feel like 4 to 6 is the amount that everybody is saying right now. Outside of, I think Mike Florio said a much larger number, but he's like the only one. So that makes me feel a little bit better about 4 to 6, because he does like to be out on a limb and wrong about that type of thing sometimes.
Yeah, Florio is almost always incorrect in his take. So I think 4 to 6 is the pretty much agreed upon terms he'll be facing. So if you draft, wow, I'm whiffing on his name, Minnesota.
Jordan Addison.
Yeah, you draft Jordan Addison and Rashee Rice, you can kind of just chain it together and always have a starter.
Or like if Rashee Rice, I mean, again, you won't know for sure when you draft him that he's not going to get. He could get suspended after week 1. He could get suspended the day before. Like I just don't know. But let's just say that he doesn't get suspended the first month of the season. You could draft that could make a Chris Godwin or Brandon Ayuk a little bit more palatable for you to draft, because you're just swapping those guys in out of your lineup for the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season. So yeah, that's a good point there. On to more legal trouble, and with this one back to back, we will stay in Cleveland with the Cleveland Browns. Quashawn Judkins today, Dalton. Jordan Schultz said on Twitter that he is not going to be facing any formal charges, and since that tweet, that seems to have come to be the case. Jordan Schultz said that he expects him to rejoin the team soon. We don't know for sure if there will be any kind of suspension or anything. I haven't heard anything leaning one way or another since those reports, but obviously this is much different from the thought that we probably all had a week ago, which was we probably won't see this guy this year. So I guess to put it simply, if Quashawn Judkins is out there week 1, do you think he's the best running back on the Cleveland Browns?
I mean, it was already dicey coming into it. His draft capital really helps himself a lot. But just today, Dylan Sampson was getting runs with the ones uh, because of this elongated trial legal situation with Quinton Judkins, along with uh, them not signing him to his second round tender. He hasn't been able to practice.
Hmm.
So we still haven't even seen Quinton Judkins on the field. And at this point, with this offense, it doesn't make a ton of sense to invest heavily in any of the fantasy assets, in my opinion. I think Jerome Ford's ADP stopped at 74.9, which is absolutely insane, all things considered, in my opinion.
Wait,
But
74.9 overall?
yes, Davis Maddock
Wow.
tweeted it out today, and I was like, wow, you should have bought the dip, not not the hype.
Yeah.
Uh, and that really is why I'm just going to probably end up taking a lot of Dylan Sampson and not a lot of everybody else. If Judkins is cheap, like in the 140s, I can see myself taking him because I do think he's a good prospect. But with some of these things, it's just the charges were dropped, but we don't know if the NFL is going to do anything with it, anyways. Like, obviously, the incident sounded pretty bad.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he's had no practice. He didn't get rookie minicamp, and we just haven't seen enough of him for me to confidently do it. And then the Browns are just such a poor team right now when it comes to their offensive situation that I don't want to be taking risks in that backfield when I think there are more profitable ones out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. He would be a guy, depending on how deep your draft is. Like, if you're drafting running backs down in the like RB60 type of range, like that's how deep your league is. He's a guy that I'm just probably taking a flyer on with my last pick because for all the reasons you kind of said, I mean, the contract thing, it's the Browns. They clearly don't care about this stuff. They signed another guy today who has been in the news for this sort of thing. Um, I'm sure they'll sign him, so I'm not worried about that side of things. The rust and just him not being there in training camp probably is a pretty big deal. So he, more than just about any other rookie, would be a guy that you probably expect to start slow. Now, I mean, I can't guarantee it. Running back, who knows? Like, he could just get thrown in there and be pretty good because he is a pretty good to great running back prospect. But I think the safe money right now would probably be on a second half surge for Quinton Judkins, which makes this backfield very complicated to bet on. It was already complicated, bad offense, and now you have, I think, the most talented guy in this room looming, but probably won't be ready to be a big time contributor. So realistically, you're drafting one of the other two guys in probably a bad offense, and you're hoping they help you in the first 8 weeks, which is still valuable. Like, you got to win those games to make the playoffs, but it just casts another shadow over this backfield, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not a good situation. And that offensive line is holding on by a thread. Like, they have good starters, and that's the extent of it. And then you're either hoping Shadur Sanders pans out or Joe Flacco is competent, which we've seen him do it before in this offense, but that was 2 years ago at this point. So just a lot of ifs and buts to get to a guy who might be your wide receiver 30 at the end of the season or your running back 30.
Yeah, no, agreed. Next one, don't know how much time we have to spend on this because I frankly don't know how fantasy relevant Isaiah Bond probably could be in redraft at this point, but it is at least noteworthy. So Isaiah Bond, people probably remember, had a lot of stuff happening before the draft. Couldn't have been more than 45 minutes after Quinton Judkins. We also get the news that the sexual assault case against Isaiah Bond, went to college at Texas, has been dropped, faces no criminal charges. They're not going to pursue it, all of that stuff. And then, like, immediately with that, and by the way, he's signing with the Browns. So the Browns have another one. Dalton, does he matter at all to you redraft wise this year?
I mean, he was a lot of a lot of people's, top five wide receiver prospects.
Waldman had him top five, right?
Yeah. One of his major issues was off the field.
Yeah.
I hate the idea of an off the field issue coming in at the end of the training camp cycle with no practice in a locker room that lacks leadership and a quarterback who, in my opinion, has a rookie quarterback who should end up being their starter has a ton of leadership issues themselves that they showed at Colorado. and the room is crowded and untalented, which I mean, he could get to the top. I don't really expect that. Again, like this guy has had 0 practice reps. If he's had off the field concerns, how frequently was he keeping himself in NFL shape?
Hmm.
Like, there's just way too many questions. This is like
Well,
I'm drafting.
how many guys have we seen, sit out training camp and they get hurt, like Brandon Ayuk last year? And we don't know this, but part of you always wonders, like, okay, how much did just not being in camp and like because being in NFL shape, you just can't do that in workouts. You have to actually be out there on the practice field and doing the football things that you're doing in games.
Yeah, and this is like I've been round 20 of a DraftKings best ball lobby, and
Yeah.
I've built such a disgusting arbitrage lineup that I'm taking Isaiah Bond as like a if this works out, I could win some money kind of deal. Sure, he's worth monitoring on waivers just because the talent is there,
Yeah.
but even then, I would say we're looking at like week 6 would be probably his first start, just because he has to get acclimated to this offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, Waldman loved him so much. If you read his reception perception profile, I don't think Harmon actually really likes him at all. Um, 47th, 24th, and 23rd percentile against man, zone, and press in college. I mean, these are 4-game samples, so it's not the whole season. He's very fast, very small, very fast, but Harmon kind of paints a skeptical picture, as like a day 2, early day 3 sort of prospect. So it's hard to know what to think because there are such wide varying opinions of him as a prospect. So yeah, he's not a guy that I'm taking a flyer on redraft, and I mean, yeah, he's just a name probably to file away for waiver wires. You're right.
Yeah, this all sounds like Kadarius Toney 2.0. It has it written all over it. If I cut names out of this and asked you who we were talking about, Kadarius Toney would be a prime candidate.
Well, this guy was accused of a lot worse than anything Kadarius Toney
Absolutely.
has done, to my knowledge, at least. Okay.
Have you heard him rap?
Well, on to the meat of the show now. Let's get to sleepers and breakouts. And we'll start with sleepers. And just as a reminder, for people, I'm sure most people who are listening to this probably have an understanding of what these things are. But just in case, so a sleeper, typically somebody going pretty deep in drafts or maybe even undrafted, and like a guy that you should keep an eye on, just file away for your waiver wire, or just someone, take a flyer with the last pick. And again, or deep draft guys, and then breakouts. I think that kind of speaks for itself, but just guys that we expect them to have a better season this year than they've ever had before. I mean, breakout, pretty self-explanatory. With that said, Dalton, let's hear your first sleeper.
Yeah, he made the thumbnail. We went deep. We were taking our beamies for this one, our melatonin. We were getting a good night's sleep because it's Torrey Horton out of Seattle.
What percentage of people do you think saw that thumbnail and knew who that was?
They probably thought it was JSN and were like, what are these guys up to? He is currently the 288th pick overall and wide receiver 90. So he's pretty deep. I'm going to talk a little bit about his time at Colorado State, where he played pretty well. From 2022, 2023, he had back-to-back 1,100 yards seasons. He led the team in 2023, averaging 8 receptions per game with 96 overall. He had 8 TDs in both 22 and 23, and he has multiple punt return TDs in his career. And then his NFL Combine, he ran a 4.41, so he's fast boy. Mm-hmm. He made it to the Blitnikoff Award watch list. Unfortunately, the reason he dropped off as kind of a higher end pick in the NFL draft was he injured his knee early on at Colorado State. But even then, he had 2 100-yard games under his belt. And then he lands in Seattle as a 5th-round pick. Head coach Mike McDaniel, already can't stop talking about him. But more importantly, like, I'm looking at the dynamics in that room. JSN is just simply better in the slot. It's where he fits. It's where his shiftiness gets him open. And Cooper Kupp, at this season in his career, he was always a slot guy, but like he's especially like at best he'll be playing flanker. So Torrey Horton's really fighting for production with MVS, who last year surprised a lot of us for like 4 weeks. But his path to getting a starting role in this offense, I think, is pretty attainable. And from there, he just has a different archetype than the other players on this roster. And if Sam Darnold looks anything close to what he did in 16 games for the Minnesota Vikings, that's a pretty exciting opportunity. Sam Darnold had the fifth longest time to hold the ball in the NFL last year because he likes to throw it intermediate and deep. And this is a guy who fits that skill set and is one of the few on the roster with that skill set. So just overall, like between the production, he took a major hit in draft capital because of an injury, and then just the offensive environment. It's one of those like I'll watch him, and if I have a deep enough league, like week one, he'll be on my roster. Nothing happens. He's a drop, but he's somebody that I'll always be watching because he has the dynamics and the ability to really break weeks for you.
Yeah, just to give maybe the concerns off the top, I think there is probably legitimate concern about are we going to get close to the same level of Sam Darnold away from the Vikings and that amazing, McVay coaching tree system. And then as far as the deep stuff, like, does the Seattle offensive line hold up well enough for them to be able to do that consistently? But I mean, this is not a bad guy at all. Like last pick, or like you said, keep an eye on in your waivers because I have never seen him play an NFL game. I'm not, I'm less than you going to get carried away with like the preseason. Not that you get carried away with it, but I pay even less attention than you do to the preseason. I know he had a nice quarter in preseason. What I will say about him, he's got a pretty nice looking reception perception profile, Dalton. 71st, 62nd, and 94th percentile against man zone press. So he is at least an interesting little player, I'd say, and a guy that, yeah, he could very well outkick his draft capital and fantasy draft capital if the opportunity is there for him.
Yeah, and that's the exciting part. It's just taking a gamble on an offense that we really don't know what it's going to look like. And if the offense is productive, a top 16 unit even, there's like a high likelihood that he is part of the reason they hit there. And then I'm not dealing with the Cooper Cup and JSN headache mix up on who's getting what, who's doing what 95% of the time.
So my first one, you'll be a fan of this one. Later on, I'm not so sure how you're going to feel about some of these guys, but my first sleeper is Bryce Young. I feel like the hype train for Bryce Young has kind of been picking up steam over these last couple of weeks. I can't really get on Twitter right now without seeing a Bryce Young timing throw being completed, which is great.
McMillan dropped it.
Yeah, Tet dropped the one in the game. There was one just today. I think maybe Leggett caught a touchdown pass and joint practice. Which, by the way, I forgot to ask. Did you have, before I get too deep into this, any takeaways from any of the NFL joint practices? Because I have one, and it is: are the Lions that good or are the Dolphins that bad? I don't know if you saw the Dolphins-Lions reports. It was like a lot of beat report. Like pretty much all of them were coming away with the same thing. I've never seen such a one-sided joint practice, offense and defense. And it's like, oof, man, that's either really concerning for one side or really great for one side, maybe a little bit of both. But not a lot of good vibes coming out of Miami, but I thought at least it was notable. The Lions offense is one that we're watching. It was notable that they did at least look good in that setting.
Yeah, on the other side of it, Miami might have the worst defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
But I mean, my only takeaway is I would like to know who to trust on Colts Twitter. In the span, for those that don't know, I am an avid Anthony Richardson truther, lover, fighter, believer. And
you heard it here first. Dalton is an Anthony Richardson lover.
In the span of 5 minutes today, I got one guy who's big on Colts Twitter that said one of the worst practices I've ever seen from Anthony Richardson. And then the second guy said, Anthony Richardson comes down the field with the ones in the 2-minute drill, scores a touchdown, and the 2-point conversion. He solidified himself as the starter after Daniels Jones throws a pick with the twos. And I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's like Schrodinger's Richardson, like that he's in a little box and you only see what you want. Because obviously last season, the biggest thing I remember is that touchdown to Alec Pierce against the Texans. There's a bunch of inaccurate throws mixed in there. I don't recall those. And I think Colts fans are suffering the same situation. So I would just like a reliable Colts reporter that I can learn, follow, catch their drift, and believe in them. And ideally, they also tell me repeatedly that Anthony Richardson is going to be the MVP this year.
um, what I would say is I saw a tweet. I wish I sent it to you, but it was basically like the tweet was basically the guy's like, no joke, either Anthony Richardson's throws were exactly on the money or like 6 feet off, and there was no in between. So it really may have depended on which part of practice these different beat reporters were seeing. Who knows? But back to his draft classmate and Bryce Young as my first sleeper. He's going as the QB 24 on Football Guys ADP, which takes a ton of different ADP, including best ball. So there's some best ball and redraft mixed in there. I have him at QB 20, not that much ahead of that, but I say QB 20 with this context of I don't really think there's much difference between my QB 12 and my QB 20 in my rank. So I am totally fine with Bryce being like, if you're in a deep enough league where you're taking 2 quarterbacks late, I'm totally fine with him being one of those guys that you maybe end up starting for, 5, 6, 7, 8 games this year. He's going behind guys like Tua, Michael Penix, who we've seen play like 2, 3 NFL games. They look pretty good, but we didn't see anybody game plan for him yet. We'll see how it goes after that happens. Cam Ward, who we quite literally have never seen play, and J.J. McCarthy, who we also quite literally have never seen play. So I think those guys, he should be going ahead of all of those guys. And then you can, I think, kind of argue about a lot of other names in that mix for me. Bryce, the second half of last year, just looked so much more comfortable. And, I did a lot of looking around and seeing what other people thought. And, I think part of it was just him improving. It also sounds like a big part of it was the Panthers adjusting their offense and catering it more to him as opposed to what the head coach wanted to do. They started off the season, a lot of play action under center, a lot of like play action boots, a lot of what like Russell Wilson in Seattle ran, and that's just never been Bryce Young's game. I mean, I was reading this article where there's a clip of him on a play action boot where number one, it's like one where it's like a naked boot, so his back is to the defender, and he's 5'10". Let's be real, like he's like 5'10". He had to jump to throw the ball over this defender as he's scrambling. Like, there's just a lot of things about what they were doing. Like their power running game, they had the worst EPA per rush in the NFL for the first half of the season while Bryce was starting. Part of that, I'm sure, were his struggles. Part of that, offensive line struggles, and part of that just not meshing with the unit offensively. So then the second half of the season, when he does come back into the lineup, they kind of remade the offense, focused it a lot more on what he's good at. I think you hear a lot of people when they're talking about Bryce mention that he's a point guard. Like he directs traffic, he kind of freelances, makes anticipation throws. Like I said, you can just search Bryce Young on Twitter and you'll see a lot of them from last season or the last couple of months. I mean, he was very comfortable against the blitz the second half of the season last year. I remember that game against the Chiefs where it was like, this is probably the most that because Spags was blitzing him. And Bryce Young hung in there to the point where Mahomes had to take the Chiefs down the field on the last drive of the game, where the Chiefs did not actually, it wasn't one of those games where it was Kansas City mistake after mistake, and that's why the Panthers were in the game. It was the defense could not stop Bryce Young and this offense. So I liked a lot of what I saw of him as a passer down the stretch. I love them adding Tet. I like Tet as a prospect. I also really like his fit with Bryce Young. Like you think about those deep outs, and you think about Bryce Young as an anticipation thrower. That to me seems like a good fit. Whereas like in years past, it's been Xavier Legette, and I'm already forgetting the name of the guy they traded to the Cowboys, like trying to masquerade as an X, and that's just not those guys gain. And now you have Jalen Coker, who's a nice receiver. Like Adam Thielen is still good somehow at age 33 or whatever it is. Chuba in the backfield. We like to. Offensive line has gotten some upgrades. There's a lot to like about this unit, a lot to like about the outlook for Bryce Young, who, by the way, averaged the most fantasy points per scramble attempt last season of any quarterback in the NFL. So that surprised me. So he does have a little bit of rushing upside there too, which was part of how he scored 36 points in the Week 18 game he played last year. So Dalton, what I know I don't have to talk you into Bryce Young, but what do you think of the Bryce Young call or just his outlook this year?
Yeah, I mean, I like Bryce Young. I like the fact that he plays in the NFC South because it's that division where the other three teams could fall apart and he could just run through them and have 6 games against bottom tier defenses the way that division plays football right now. I like the later approach they've taken with their offense and their building. They didn't lose anybody in free agency, anybody substantial to their team. So they're just adding McMillan on top of that as their potential wide receiver one solution. You have Jatavian Sanders, who, if you remember in the Chiefs game, he took a bad hit to the head. He landed on it. It wasn't quite right the rest of the season, but up until then, he was becoming one of Bryce Young's premier targets in the game. So they're going to have a pretty good layered passing attack between Coker and Leggett and McMillan and Jatavian Sanders. Their run game last year really got it together in the second half. Chuba Hubbard did a really good job at getting them what they needed. And they're a team that just keeps looking like they're going to continue to ascend. I still really like that offensive line. It's a competent, above average offensive line that gives Young the time he needs. And just like I said last year, one of the biggest calling points of Drew Brees' career was he needed good guards because of his size issues. And Bryce Young has really good guards. So that really helps him navigate the pocket and play. And if he can get this anticipation timing down, then he's going to be what we were kind of expecting out of him as the first overall pick 3 years ago.
Yep, I agree. Okay, your second sleeper.
We're moving all the way to the West Coast this time.
Okay.
We're going with
Were
Ricky.
you already on the West Coast? Seattle?
Well, you were on the East Coast.
Oh, okay.
We're going to go with Ricky Pearsall, who right now is wide receiver 43, going in the late 90s. First of all, for the third year in a row, the 49ers are so incredibly brittle on offense, relying on Trent Williams. George Kittle's having the best camp of his life, which is weird to hear about a player who usually you're past the camp hype, but he's getting it. Yeah. Today, Kyle Shanahan came out and said Christian McCaffrey's GPS tracking surpassed any speed he's ever hit. So I don't know if we're kind of saying the fish is a little bigger than the one we caught, or if this offense really is poised to do well. But one thing I know is the wide receiver room is in shambles. They trade away Deebo Samuel. Juwan Jennings is questionable for week 1. He has a knee sprain. We don't know when we're going to see Brandon Ayuk, and we also don't know what we're going to see out of Brandon Ayuk. Yeah. His 8 weeks last year were pretty terrible for the expectations he had coming into the season, and it showed that he didn't practice with that rust. Last season, Ricky Pearsall actually had the most yards in a game since Jerry Rice for a rookie, which was pretty impressive. Obviously, he overcomes the gunshot wound, and then he had a strong finish with 17 fantasy points in 3 games. He averaged 1.59 yards per route run when he lined up outside and 0.87 in the slot. So, he was a productive player. He was a guy we really liked. And if you just go back and look at his collegiate career at Florida, he had 20 yards per catch. And he had 2.11 yards per route run versus man, 1.9 versus zone. And he was playing every single position on that Florida offense, which when we talked about him in the draft was a really strange offense, didn't really have a lot going for it. And he was just playing at every level. He was an incredibly explosive player at Florida, and getting him in a Shanahan offense and getting him a full-time role, he gets a full training camp because he hasn't been shot. So I really like it, and I like the fit he gives with Brock Purdy as a guy that can give Brock Purdy an athlete that can extend at multiple levels of the field. He's not just a slot guy. He's not just a vertical. He can run the route tree, and he's successful at running that route tree.
Yeah, and, I think a lot of, I've seen a couple film guys say, he was down the stretch of the season last year, he was starting to really torch man coverage. That was not the case earlier on, and you can understand exactly why. I mean, probably around a year ago, not much off of a year ago, he got shot in the chest and was already before that had missed pretty much all of the offseason with I think it was a hamstring injury.
Mm-hmm.
I think he also had been dealing with a hamstring injury a little bit this offseason too. But so he basically got no offseason last year. Was not able to do any sort of workouts, I'm sure, for quite some time last year. Like it's a miracle that he even played at all last year and showed a lot down the stretch, I thought. And it's funny because I feel like that's kind of the disconnect. Because you mentioned some of those numbers. I feel like a lot of people who are all numbers based in these sorts of arguments don't love Pearsall as much as the film guys, and that's because the beginning of his season kind of drags down the what I think would have been the overall picture. So, I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you. He is going to be a topic of discussion for me in a couple weeks, and I'll just leave it at that with Ricky Pearsall. But love the player, loved the prospect, still love the player, and I mean, you said it. He is kind of finding himself in a pretty nice little situation for a year two breakout. A guy who is not in a nice situation, and I'm not even sure. I guess it'll probably be a breakout because he just hasn't really done anything in his NFL career. But most of it, I would say, is just not really his fault. That's Cedric Tillman. This is a deep one. Wide receiver 64 on Football Guys ADP. I mean, we didn't rank that deep. I would probably have him a little higher than that. And again, he's a tough one because the first year he basically didn't play. He kind of fit the profile as far as like outside receiver, guy who only played on one side of the field. A lot of those guys, it takes them a little bit of time to kind of find their footing in the NFL. And then for the first half of last year, you know, Amari Cooper was still there. So, like, there just wasn't really a path to playing time. When that path did finally get cleared, we got a month of it, and that month was really, really good. 14, 25.4, 16.5, and 6.2 in the only 4 games he played start to finish and played over half the snaps last season. I'm obviously not expecting that. I mean, that's 2 wide receiver 1 finishes, I think, I'd say. But weeks 1 through 6 last year, 43% of his snaps were out of the slot. Once Amari Cooper was gone, he was in the slot just 19% of the time. So this is a guy that I think finally was put, like, he was ready, and then he was put in the correct position for him in this offense. And then he got the concussion, and it took him a while to come back, and it just wasn't the same once he did. So I'm not expecting him, like I said, to go as nuclear as he did with, I think it was Deshaun for 1 game and Jameis Winston for the other 3. Not expecting that. But, you know, we've never been the biggest Jerry Jeudy fans. And just, I think the overall takeaway is there shouldn't be 30-plus receiver slots between these 2 guys in ADP right now.
Yeah, I mean, I've loved Cedric Tillman coming out of Tennessee. I always thought he was the better player than Jalen Hyatt in that same class.
And that's probably going to end up true.
Yeah. And I mean, he's a big body X guy who, in the span, he was able to play full-time snaps under like a middle tier offense at best. He was highly productive. Concussions are a concern, just like to our stand, Chris Olave. But great player. He was really strong last year. I mean, if you remember the Ravens comeback the Browns had, he was a big reason for that comeback. He was able to get open. I remember especially it was a 3rd and like 10 for Jameis, and he was able to get behind what looked like a cover 3 zone and just right about 20 yards behind the sticks. He was wide open and caught the ball and took it for another 5 or 10 yards. So he's a really good feel for zones. And yeah, not a big fan of Jerry Jeudy. The rest of the wide receivers on this roster, I mean, I'm hoping for Deontay Johnson, but who knows where that guy is at in his mentals. And then on top of that, they've added Isaiah Bond, but there's really nobody challenging him for those X receiver snaps. That's not a Deontay Johnson role. That's not a Jerry Jeudy role. That could be an Isaiah Bond role if you're just looking for speed out there. But even then, he's too small to win against those corners. So he's one of the few players on this roster who probably has a concrete spot. And I mean, a bit positive Browns talk because of everything we've said. This is the year Kevin Stefanski is going to be able to go back to his offense, which we saw 2 seasons ago. Last year, they redesigned that entire offense for Deshaun Watson, trying to make up for what he was, which he's a guy who doesn't want to play under center. He's a guy who wants to play out of shotgun. Similar stuff we hear about Joe Burrow. But Stefanski really is under center, run heavy, play action, turn your back to the defense, offensive-minded coach. And that's the most successful offenses we've seen out of Cleveland. So with a return to that, we could definitely also just see some positive regression in that offense. And I think Tillman might be – Jerry Jeudy is probably still more talented, especially with Twitter videos. But I think Tillman kind of has the best opportunity to be a top-end wide receiver out of this offense.
Yeah, they should just be closer in ADP. I think that's my biggest takeaway. Okay, your third one, Dalton.
We're going deep again, but we're jumping to the other side of the coast yet again. We are going to Washington for Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt. And first of all,
this is not – I was in Cleveland, so not the other side.
But now we're talking just about me because I was on the West Coast.
Okay, so you're just deeply confusing me with all this coast.
You just got to – it's layered. It's layered. You got to keep up with it. But first I want to say this is before Ben Standig came out today and said what he said. For those who aren't aware, Ben Standig came out on this podcast and was like, I don't know if Brian Robinson is going to be on this roster with the way Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt is playing.
Yeah, I saw that. And that's one of – I don't know.
It's absurd.
I find that hard to believe.
It's absurd to ever cut a rookie on a rookie deal in a position where you always need depth. And your third stringer behind that, if that was the way the roster was playing out, would be Austin Eckler. So that's not the reason he's landing here. I just believe he's a really talented player. The first thing you have to understand, part of the reason he went in the 7th round of the NFL is because he didn't play except for one game at Arizona last season. And the reason for that is the NCAA is kind of a corrupt organization and wouldn't let him play football, essentially. So just important context to that. Before that, he was a MAC athlete, which those guys always get dinged when it comes to the draft, but I don't think the 7th round is where he would land. And more importantly, I think he got pushed out even deeper in the way this draft class was. You go back to his time in New Mexico, he had almost 1,200 rushing yards. He had 6.3 yards per carry, 17 rushing touchdowns. Against Utah State and Fresno State, he had 204 and 233 yards. He had 3.24 yards after contact and forced 129 missed tackles. Like, he's a really explosive, upright runner who does things well. His path to RB2 is pretty clear to me. Austin Eckler is on the wrong side of age 30. We saw a bit of the decline last year just in health concerns, but he was still a pretty efficient player. But Eckler is getting up there in age. You talk about Brian Robinson. It's just he hasn't been a really aggressively surprising back. I don't think he does anything spectacularly well. He just plays the football game pretty effectively. And Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt's already out there getting reps with the ones. He got time with the ones in their preseason game. He looked pretty good in his limited playing time. So at a price tag of RB68, I'm okay taking the shot here, calling it. He's going to be a sleeper because this is going to be one of the best rushing offenses. You go and you look at some of the studies that Fantasy Points has done, and a rushing quarterback usually positively correlates to the running back getting better yards per carry and being a more effective fantasy scorer. So all around, I really like Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt, and I think that he's a good shot to be, a big contributor in an offense that we expect to be top 5, top 10 again.
Yeah, and you did answer the question I was going to ask kind of at the very end. You said RB68, you're like, okay, I'm taking the shot on him as a sleeper. Does that mean you're drafting him like last pick of your team, or is this more of like you're letting him sit out there in waivers and just seeing what happens sort of deal?
This is definitely like I would draft him last pick of my team.
Okay.
If you gave me some names who were going around there, I could give you some better analysis, but let me just look it up. The guy right above him is Brashard Smith. Damn it. But then, like, above those guys by about 20 spots is DJ Giddens and Will Shipley.
Yeah.
I like him better. Jarquez Hunter's above them. I still like him better than Jarquez Hunter. Miles Sanders, I like Miles Sanders better. Woody Marks, or I don't like Miles Sanders better. Woody Marks, I still like Crosby Merritt better. Roshan Johnson, I still like Crosby Merritt better. Justice Hill. I mean, there's like a probably 10 to 15 spots I prefer him above a lot of these running backs I'm seeing.
Yeah, the thing I would say about this situation is, Brian Robinson's a solid player. Eckler, obviously on the decline. We'll see what he looks like this year. This is not such a infallible top two running back group that he can't crack the rotation if he's ready. So I don't know a ton about him, to be honest. So I can't give like an opinion on what kind of player I think he is. I know he's been getting a lot of hype from beat reporters. Draft guys seem to like him too. So we'll see. But I don't mind picking a cheap running back on, like you said, probably a good rushing offense and in a backfield where again, Brian Robinson is a good player and does a lot of the things that coaches like, but he's also not so good that he can't be not replaced. Well, maybe replaced. He could be replaced, but more realistically, have his snaps eaten into a little bit. And then if something were to happen to one of these two guys, he probably would have some relevance in that case too.
Yeah, and I'm not calling him the next Bucky Irving, but I'm going to paint a quick comparison. Like last year, everybody was in on Rachaad White based on the volume play and the who else play, and there wasn't a lot of excitement around the actual player.
Yeah.
And that's a similar situation we have in Washington where
Yeah,
Brian
and I
Robinson
think
is
last year,
doing
because
it.
none of us really liked Bucky Irving that much, neither of us did
No.
as a prospect, and so we were like, man, we wish somebody that we really liked went to Tampa because we just don't. There's just no way Rachaad White's living up to this, but like I don't like anybody else there, so we didn't rank Rachaad White where others were. But yeah, that's a great point to make.
Yeah.
There.
But yeah, super excited about him. For any listeners, I did get him in our dynasty league back in May, so I'm not like brand new to this hype train. I've been on the hype train.
My third and final sleeper, trying to keep up here. Not only are we going to stay on the same coast, we're going to almost be in the same metro area with this one. Going to Baltimore, Keaton.
Don't
Mitchell.
Do it.
Keaton
Okay.
Mitchell.
Okay.
What do you think I was going to say? Rashad Bateman?
I thought we were doing Bateman for like 12th year in a row. I was like, stop.
No, Rashad Bateman is not a topic here. However, Keaton Mitchell, most people probably don't know. I don't even know if it was just between you and I or if John was in the conversation too. Probably our most contentious fantasy football debate of all time probably was about Keaton Mitchell and Derrick Henry, and like as it relates to Jonathan Brooks and his torn ACL, and it all ended up not mattering last year anyway.
A great debate that not a single.
That's usually how it goes. All of our most heated debates actually doesn't mean anything. But Keaton Mitchell, this is a guy who you probably don't have to draft him. He's the RB71 on Football Guys consensus ADP. Best ball, I've taken him every time at the end of my draft. Redraft if you in a deeper league. Oh, go ahead.
He's lower than Crosby Barrett.
Yeah, I mean on Football Guys, RB71.
I haven't looked. That's just I would take him over Barrett just for what it's worth. But okay, go ahead.
Well, so he tore his ACL in 2023, was out for a good chunk of last season. Came back off the PUP, took him a while to ramp up, and played a little bit last year, but didn't play much, never really got integrated into the offense, and just like clearly was not quite himself yet, which is not terribly shocking for a guy that tore his ACL, a calendar year before that. A lot of times that's what happens, which is why, Dalton kind of painted a picture of doubt on Brandon Ayuk earlier. It's the same sort of deal, and especially for a running back like Keaton Mitchell, where, I mean, I don't know how familiar people are with Keaton Mitchell. Just go look up a clip or two of him and then look up like a Devon Achane long run. It's pretty similar as far as the pop and speed and quick cuts. Like, he's that kind of athlete. So a guy like that, he really needs to have his full burst to be an effective NFL running back because, like Devon Achane, he is a very small boy. With that said, he's another year removed from that injury. All of the health reports that I've seen coming out of camp from beat reporters, from coaches, are that he looks great. Like, this looks like 2023 explosiveness from Keaton Mitchell again. And, I'm not going to project he's like taking Derrick Henry's job, obviously. I don't even know, like, it's hard to say he's taking Justice Hill's job because I actually just saw a clip from their running backs coach yesterday who pretty much said, like, I love this running back room because we've got Derrick Henry, who's the early down, like he called him the normal running back, I think is what he said. We've got the pass catcher and Justice Hill, and then he said Keaton Mitchell is so unique, we're just gonna find ways to get him the ball. So I don't know what that means. Like I don't know what the usage will look like for Keaton Mitchell if this room is fully healthy. What I do know is that, in my opinion, he is a much better player than Justice Hill. Will he take that third down role? I don't know because I don't know if he like the pass blocking. I just don't know enough to know if that stuff is there. But at this price, which is basically nothing, like I think Keaton Mitchell is very talented. And Derrick Henry at this point of his career is pretty much a 50% of the snaps guy. Now he gets a lot of touches when he's in. So there may not be a ton of touches, but I think there is room for another fantasy relevant back if it were to consolidate around one. And then obviously you've got the upside of if something happened to one of these other two guys, he'd probably be even more involved. He'd probably be a little bit involved already. And I think specifically, if something were to happen to Derrick Henry, I'd be more inclined to say Keaton Mitchell is the 1A than Justice Hill is the 1A in this backfield. And like Washington, this will be a very good rushing offense.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you. I like Keaton Mitchell. Yes, last Thursday before our pod, I got to watch him tear up my glorious Colts. Uh, he had an amazing night, and I had a terrible night. But you look at Justice Hill's production last season. He was RB 39. He had 5 games in the top 24. He only maxed out at 12 touches in a game, so it's not like he was getting a ton of work, but he was being really effective in that work. Keaton Mitchell is definitely a better runner than Justice Hill. The pass catching, maybe there's a little bit to be seen, but he does add an element of explosiveness to this offense that really only Derrick Henry gives them. Even
Henry
in their
and Zay Flowers,
yeah,
it's those two guys.
and that's about the extent of their explosiveness. And I mean, they can get by on that because Lamar himself is an explosive weapon with the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
But Keaton Mitchell gives that offense just another layer to move in. And at this price tag, I mean, you're betting on a guy who, if he gets just the same touches as Justice Hill got, you have a significant chance of having an easy flex play on a week to week. And he's one of the few players who has home run hitter ability. And as we screamed at each other until we were red in our face last year, Derrick Henry, he's not going to play 90% of the snaps.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be some opportunity for it. And a change of pace back behind Derrick Henry has been shown to be productive in the past.
Mm-hmm. You know what's funny? As I'm looking down, I just realized. So I reordered some of the stuff in my dock. Bryce Young, folks, he's a breakout, not a sleeper. I gave you a breakout earlier, so sneak peek there. So actually, one more sleeper over here from me, and that is none other than Tank Bigsby, which, if you know anything about us, might come as a little bit of a surprise. We talked plenty of junk about Tank Bigsby after his rookie year, and it was bad. The rookie year was very, very bad. It was like Kadarius Toney, I'm going to give the other team the ball levels of bad on a handful of occasions. But then last year, ETN had a lot of health issues and just also in general took a step back. The whole team had a terrible season, obviously. But Tank Bigsby was pretty darn good as a runner last year. I mean, you look at a lot of just the underlying stats for him as a rusher. He was better than ETN in yards after contact, yards per carry, rushing yards. He only had 18 more carries, rushing touchdowns. He's third in the NFL in avoided tackle rate, ninth in explosive run rate, third in yards after contact rate. And he and Kenneth Walker are the only two running backs in the NFL last season to have 150 or more carries and have 70% of their yards gained after contact. So, maybe he can get better blocking this year and his life can be a little bit easier. Please, Liam Cohen, figure something out. I said all that to say, he's RB41 on Football Guys. I have him at RB32, and I still have Travis Etienne ahead of him by a couple spots. So this still isn't me saying he's going to take over this backfield and he's going to be the back to own. I do think there is a chance that does happen. Just like there's a chance for any of these three guys, really, varying degrees in this backfield. But I'm pretty confident he's the best between the tackles runner on this team. I know he's better between the tackles than Travis Etienne. Etienne's more of an outside zone, get to the edge, use his speed kind of guy. Tank can actually kind of run mean, break tackles between the tackles, unlike Etienne. So I feel pretty safe in saying that Tank is going to get legitimate rushing volume this year. The passing game upside is the concern, but I mean, if he's going to be the RB32, he doesn't necessarily have to have that if he's the goal line back, which I think he probably should be in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, you clearly didn't hear about the video that no one got of Bishal Tootin
Oh, trust
with the
me, I've
ones.
seen it. 50-yard touchdown run or catch, whatever it was. Tank Bigsby's tweeting emojis. Travis
Yeah,
Etienne cramps up, so he's not talking to the media. Oh my God, is he getting traded or is Tank getting benched? And that's why he's tweeting. I just can't keep up with all the stuff with this backfield, but I don't mind taking my shot on the guy that I think is the best in between the tackles runner of the group.
well, I'll just tell our viewers if you really want to see that video, you go to the hub on the little black and yellow site, and you type Tootin for 80, and you're gonna get the video that you're looking for. It's out there. You gotta stay strong, Tootin Hive. Um, But I mean, I don't hate this. I don't love Tank Bigsby. The reason is Liam Cohen has utilized his offense in Tampa, where like everybody was a weapon and could do everything. Like he was moving Mike Evans into the slot and guys to the outside and getting really funky. And Tank Bigsby is the most restrictive back to have on the field for those environments because he is kind of a one-way player.
Yeah,
Going back to his rookie season, like one of his worst plays was the pick six he gave up
yeah,
in the end zone,
yeah.
where he literally
Kadarius Toney like
yeah.
player.
I still think right now this backfield belongs to ETN, and I think that Tootin provides like a better option than Tank Bigsby. Uh, that's just my take on it. Is that he just doesn't give Liam Cohen as much versatility in the offense, and they're going to be looking for that. So I don't hate it, and I think he could very well end up being the goal line back. And I do expect this offense to be better just because of better coaching and a better wide receiver too. That they're going to work things out, but I like taking my bets on Tootin and ETN.
Yeah, and like as far as the like versatile weapons and stuff, there wasn't really a back in Tampa Bay like Tank Bigsby, so we just don't really. And obviously these offenses are different. Like there's no Mike Evans. Like yes, Brian Thomas is a bit, but it's just they're different units as much as like people want to say, okay, like who is the Chris Godwin? Okay, that's Travis Hunter. Like, do we have the Bucky Irving? Oh, that's probably going to be Tootin or ETN. Like, maybe it works out that way, but also like, let's just, I would say let's just pump the brakes on. And I'm not saying you're doing this, but just in general, like, let's pump the brakes on the okay, Tampa did this, this, and this, so that's exactly what the Jags offense is going to do. We'll see. Like it could be a situation like the Panthers where some of the stuff just doesn't take and they have to adjust and kind of placate to the offense a little bit. I'm sure Cohen will figure it out. I'm sure it'll be a good offense. I'm sure it'll be better than what it was last year. But yeah, like I said, I like the player enough as a runner to take a what I would consider a pretty cheap shot on him at this point. And who knows? One of he or Travis Etienne could be on a different team in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Like
Cleveland.
Dallas. Like, please send one of them to Dallas, for the love of God. Like, did you consider Javonte Williams for this list? I didn't. If he had anything left in the tank, he would be on this list, Like,
I forgot he existed.
yeah. So, and I don't like Jaden Blue, especially. So, yeah, send one of these guys to Dallas. But I'll just take my cheap shot here. Okay. Your first breakout, like I said, I already gave my Bryce Young by accident as a breakout. Because I think I had Tank as a breakout at first. I was like, wait a minute, what did he finish last year? Running back 31. I have him ranked 32. I guess he's a sleeper. Okay, your first breakout.
Yeah, so we're gonna jump back to the metro you were in before you messed up the order because we're staying in the same metro area because we're going to Drake May for the New England Patriots.
Heavily considered him for my list.
Yeah. First of all, those that don't know, I had the hardest time listening to analysts, and I finally bought in and gave up on the Drake May over Caleb Williams hype. and said Drake May might not be a good prospect. And I feel terrible about not holding strong to my take that he was, because I believe now strongly he is. He had a pretty good rookie season despite not starting the whole season. He had 15 touchdowns and 2,300 passing yards. And then he had 421 rushing yards at 7.8 yards per carry, which is really impressive because he didn't have a single designed run. All of those were scrambled drill runs.
Yeah, so the Bryce Young stat I gave earlier, Drake May was second in the NFL in that scramble stat.
And the biggest thing about that is they're going to design him up some runs this season. He's a very, very good runner. Sneaky good, some could say.
Real gym rat.
Real gym rat. I mean, he's a Pro Bowl quarterback, which I think, we should talk about that. But he also set the Patriots rookie record TD passes. Last season, when you just kind of break down his attempts, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. He had a passer rating of 88.1 and a QBR of 58.6, which lands him right at 17th. And what all this is important about is he was throwing to the worst receiving corps in the NFL.
Yeah. And had terrible coaching to boot.
Yeah. It sounds like both Kendrick Bourne and Jalen Polk are roster bubble candidates at this point. They bring in Kyle Williams, who I already really liked coming into the draft. They add Stephon Diggs. They add Travion Henderson. And then they also go out and they bulk up this offensive line and they give him Will Campbell in the first round. This offense
and Pop Douglas still around, and Ramondre Stevenson still around.
And Pop Douglas, I mean, really fits a McDaniels offense who's leading this. McDaniels has always been a significantly better offensive coordinator than he was a head coach.
Yeah.
He's going to get the best out of Drake May. And then you combine like competent head coaching. Similar story we had with Caleb Williams last week, where Mike Vrabel's just going to come in and run this thing like a professional workshop and give Drake May the weapons he needs. So
one of my favorite things has been watching Vrabel try to break up all of these joint practice fights and somehow end up at the bottom of every
Yes. So, I mean, the guy only had 12 starts and he had almost 500 rushing yards. If you just extract that out, he could get up to like 700. And if they do some design rushes for him, it's way more effective. He has a way better passer core around him. I think he makes a really strong push for the top 12 quarterbacks. And with the rushing upside, there's always that sneaky ability for him to reach the top 5, even if he doesn't have the best passing season, just because he's going to get done on the ground.
Yeah, no, nothing else to add on my end. I'm also a believer in Drake May. I like the kind of new look offense around him. Having competent adults on the coaching staff will make a big difference too. And like Travion Henderson is going the house a couple of 10-yard.
He's so good.
He's so good. He's been so fun to watch. Like just the kick return that he had in their preseason game.
Well, the last thing I'll say, because I think this is just notable, Drake May's first 10 NFL touchdowns went to 10 different receivers.
Yeah.
Like they were playing with nobodies, and Ramondre Stevenson couldn't even do anything for him. Because
Hunter Henry is probably the only guy that you even cared about as a pass catcher there last year.
I mean, we were talking about Kayshon Boutte,
who's still there, by the way.
Yeah, somehow. Side note, deep find. Watch this Eftim Chisholm space. Eftim Chisholm for the Patriots starting roster. He could be something.
What position does he play?
He's a wide receiver.
Come on! I don't know who that is. I was hoping this was going to be like our next J.J. Taylor. Remember him? Little 5'6" running back.
Short king.
Just never got his chance. Okay, my next guy we talked about last week. So it might be a little repetitive, but I know people may not, someone may listen to this who didn't listen to last week. That's Rome Odunze.
Okay, can we just do a quick merge? Because I also have Rome Odunze.
Okay, I'll let you go first because I feel like I talked about him more positively last week because you had to be the negative Rome Odunze guy last week.
I mean, everything you said last week, like I said, I agree with. I'm not doing the thing where I'm buying.
To be clear, I have him ranked wide receiver 24. You don't have to draft him there. He's going 34. That's just like my blinking, flashing red lights way of saying, make sure you draft this guy maybe a little bit earlier than the ADP. And also, if he actually does pop, I want to be able to look back and say, haha, I had him 24 and I was right.
Yeah, and you go back to the draft last year, he was getting talk of being as good as Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr.
From us.
From us and other people, notable people.
Yeah, not just us, but also us.
And he landed in the least of effective environment. First of all, unlike Neighbors and unlike Harrison, he had to fight for time on the field, and he had to fight for time on the field because they had a good wide receiver in DJ Moore and another good one in Keenan Allen, and he had to do that 3 times because they had 3 different offensive play callers during that time frame. In that same time frame, Caleb Williams was watching film by himself because nobody was telling him how to watch film, and they were running some of the worst NFL concepts ever. There were breakdowns by real NFL scouts that were like, "What are we doing on this play?"
Guys are running into each other. I think Rome Odunze to Matt Harmon, without fully saying it, kind of said we didn't really have we weren't marking certain spots on the field this is where you sit in zone coverage on this play, and so that's why Matt is okay, the zone coverage is really the only concern from his reception perception profile last year. Maybe if there's some actual detail and nuances as are being taught in the offense, that will improve. And I mean, that's what everybody says about Ben Johnson, right? Is he is the most detailed guy there is on the offensive side of the ball. So it'll definitely be a cleaner, more professionally run operation for all of these guys.
Yeah, and I really like Luther Burden, but guy hasn't seen a lot of the practice field.
Yeah.
And him and DJ Moore both have had off-field issues. DJ Moore has had it in the NFL, and his current coach has a problem with it. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if year 2 Rome Odunze is as good as DJ Moore without some of the off-the-field concerns.
Yeah.
And so
he's the guy that Ben Johnson seems the most enamored with in the media right now. We'll see if that translates. But
yes. Also, did you know Ben Johnson hasn't been asked about Roshan Johnson in any press conferences? Super weird fact.
I don't know if it's weird. I just think Roshan Johnson really isn't very good.
Watch Kyle Monagai. I'm going to keep giving these subtle drops. F. Tim Chisholm, Kyle Monagai.
Well, that one's a good one, and that one's also one I've actually heard of. DeAndre Swift is never going to have a full backfield to himself, guys.
Especially not with the coach who already canned him once.
Yeah. So I talked about the Ben Johnson quote last week a little bit in late July, kind of talking about how he thinks Rome is a prototypical X receiver. Talked about how he can win in a lot of ways on the outside. And I just think that this is a guy that has elite body control, really good hands. There's a reason why some draft people kind of coined him as bigger Chris Olave coming out of college. Great route runner, but also just bigger, more physically imposing, can do more. I guess we'll see what happens, but the beat reporters sure seem pretty sold on the connection between he and Caleb Williams right now. You hear about it pretty much every day, and you especially hear about it in the red zone as him being a go-to guy. That stuff can be a little bit fluky, but also, like I said, he has all of the skills that you would kind of want in order to be that guy. And I mean, he just got no layup opportunities last year, which goes a little bit back to the offense. And let's scheme him up a little bit more, because he can certainly do it. And I gave this stat last week from Rich Rybar. He ran 144 routes last year where there was not a target on the play. Not where he did not get targeted, where there was not a target on the play. And I think just when you isolate Rome and his separation and his ability, yes, there were some miscommunications between he and Caleb Williams. I wonder how much of that goes back to kind of the not functional offense and guys not knowing where to be. We'll see in year 2, I guess, on that. But, man, I just think everything is set up for Rome Odunze to be right there with DJ Moore as the top guy in this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there. Anybody will remember he had an all-green reception profile coming out of college. He has the talent and the skills to be there. Now he has the coach to get them there, and he has the quarterback with those capabilities to help them.
Yep. Okay, my third one. I know we're going a little bit long, so I'll breeze through this one. Dalton Kincaid, which feels disgusting to say. I swear this is the last time I'm going back to this well. If it doesn't work out, he goes in the Rashad Bateman bin after this year. He's the tight end 13 on Football Guys ADP. I have him at tight end 9. The thing about him is, if you were describing what you need to be a tight end breakout, he's pretty much got all of it. Good offense, prime breakout age. If you're a draft capital guy, he's got that. Above average athleticism and route running.
Sneaky
And
good athlete.
sneaky, some might say. And then targets in this offense that are really up for grabs. I mean, Khalil Shakir, currently injured. We'll see what his status is, whether or not he misses time, how effective he is off of the high ankle sprain. We've seen those linger for guys in the past, so we'll see what happens there. And then, like, they're really counting on Josh Palmer to, like, there's really nobody else that inspires a ton of confidence. That doesn't
Elijah Moore,
another guy there. Like, that doesn't by itself mean that Kincaid's going to have some amazing year, but there are reasons to think that a guy who does have some talent can earn volume in this offense. And it's funny because, like, he's not really been used the way he was in college. Part of that is because the Bills have shifted. It's funny. They draft this pass-catching tight end, and that coincides with the shift to a kind of run-first offense. So I think that has hurt him a little bit. But when he's been in there, he does get used a lot. Like, I think he was the tight end 8 in usage last season before he got hurt, and he did play through multiple injuries last season. This guy had an 8.3% first down per route run rate, 1.62 yards per route run. You compare that to Tucker Kraft, 6.9% and 1.63. That's a guy that a lot of people are in on as a breakout. We just don't have as much baggage with him as we do with Kincaid at this point. So I'm not saying go crazy. I get he was the tight end 26 last year. He missed time. He was hurt. He was also frustrating. He also had, like, kind of the Xavier Worthy of tight end seasons last year. I know some Josh Allen clips were making the rounds from the podcast. One of them was him basically saying, yeah, I overthrew Dalton on like 3 or 4 touchdowns last year. That was my bad. It's like, oh,
it's okay, Josh.
Yeah.
I forgive you.
And you also remember the play against Detroit where he had the chest pass touchdown that got called back. That was to Dalton Kincaid. So, like, we were probably pretty close to Kincaid having a little bit of a disappointing season last year, but not extremely disappointing, and it just the ball didn't quite bounce his way. So what kind of volume he gets, we'll see. You would think, as far as this offense goes, like, he could emerge as a red zone guy in this offense. I just have never been a Keon Coleman guy. Shakir, obviously good player. Outside of that, like, just don't love the pass catching weapons in this offense. So I'm fine taking a gamble on him as, like, you go late at tight end, you take him, you see how it goes for a couple of weeks, and you go from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that a quarterback that's as critically acclaimed as Josh Allen, you can't get, like, whoever he's feeding it to like you can with some of the other elites.
Yeah.
I can't rot you for putting a first-round pick higher. I did it for 6 years with Noah Fant. He hasn't signed with the team yet, by the way.
No, he's with Cincy. He's with Cincy.
Oh,
right?
He's with Cincy.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's good to know. But I can't hate on it. It's definitely just an arbitrage play. You know they're going to put up points. You know someone has to get those points. I don't particularly like Keon Coleman either. He was on a lot of lists when I was doing research, by the way.
Was he really?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's probably a similar argument to Kincaid in that, you know, he was a first-round pick. There's a lot of volume. Like, the difference between Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid is I do at least, like, kind of believe in Kincaid, the player, more so than Keon Coleman, Coleman just showed very little last year.
Yeah, and I've been taking a ton of Elijah Moore under the same pretense of, like, maybe the Shakir injury is actually really concerning in a lot of ways because it's just in so many different ways a high ankle sprain affects players and they really need him to be effective. And then outside of that, this room is just really devoid of, like, a real true number one for them to have.
Yep. Okay, we're down to your last one now. Is that correct?
Yep. We can go quick on this guy. I think you and I have talked about him for years, but it's Jaylen Warren. I mean, he's going as the RB31 right now. The preseason debut for Caleb Johnson was, like, bad enough that you should consider what happened in that game. He had 2 drop passes. He had 1 missed block.
I did see a pass, like, almost hit off his face. He got his hands up.
It was pretty bad. And part of the reason that I have a concern for that is because he has a quarterback who does not play that rookie game.
Yeah.
He plays favorites heavily.
Well, I already
And,
made the comment to you. Like, you remember the Najee Harris 19 catch game or whatever it was from Big Ben? Like,
mhm.
that's the stage of the game that Rodgers is at right now. And it may not be pretty, but Jalen Warren can be effective as a check down guy.
Yeah, well, and just so like Arthur Smith has always run a two back set.
Yeah.
So even if Caleb Johnson is good, uh, Jalen Warren is the other guy in that two back set.
Yeah. And
But
we know he's good.
yeah, we've also been hearing a lot of Kenneth Gainwell hype from Arthur Smith, which
Have we
tells
really?
me,
Wow.
yeah, which tells me a significant thing about where Caleb Johnson is at in his development. Last year and over his career, uh, 4.8 yards per carry and 346 attempts. He has 99 catches over the last 2 seasons, which is seventh among running backs. He's third in yak among qualifying backs over the last 2 years. And he's fit from week 8 to 18 last year. I took that sample size because Russell Wilson had taken over. The offense changed. He was 15th in missed tackles forced. Like, he's a really good back. And he never really hasn't been. It's just there was a Najee Harris who was applauded for them. Their offensive line is one of the youngest in the league and is going to get a little better this season, I would expect. And they have a coordinator who's made really effective use of two running back rooms in the past. And then his receiving upside, Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to get hit at 40.
No. I mean, that's why Garrett Wilson struggled last year because Rodgers didn't want to hang in there.
Yeah. And this is the outlet play on this team. And he's going to get maybe a few medicine balls where the linebacker's screaming in on him.
Yeah.
But I feel pretty strongly that his RB31, I think he should well be within the top 24.
Yeah, I mean, he's floated around that RB2 range plenty in the past. So yeah, with potentially a better chance to be on the field more often. Like, last year was also just riddled with injuries for him. He's had a healthy camp. Hopefully that continues. Like, I'm all in on the player. Real quickly before we get out of here, we did get a comment from Rulebs in the chat. If I'm saying that somewhat right. Sorry if you sent it a lot earlier. Using a new streaming software, don't have the chat quite as readily available. Brock Bowers, would y'all take him in round 1 of a 14-man draft? As long as there's no tight end premium scoring, I would still say no. Like, love Brock Bowers, the player. I know he was amazing last year. I'd argue that his volume probably should go down this year, not because of anything wrong with him, but probably a healthier offense. He'll be more efficient, I would say too. But yeah, I would probably be looking more like second, probably mid to late second round. But we've always been kind of later on tight ends that early in the draft.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, every season we just have a tight end that comes out of nowhere. Nobody's probably going to come close to what Brock Bowers is scoring, but especially in a deeper league, it is way harder for you to find 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers when you're in a 14-man, and you're going to start looking at players like Romeo Doubs as your wide receiver 3 if you draft inappropriately. But if you're taking a tight end in round 14, I mean, guys like we've mentioned, Tucker Kraft, Dalton Kincaid, I mean, hell, even Kyle Pitts, they're all going that late, and they give you like enough each week that you want to have real premier players. And Brock Bowers can finish the tight end 1, but that's just like the wide receiver 9 or 10,
Yeah.
which you're going to get out of guys like PTJ, Drake London, who are all going in that same 14 range. And their upside is wide receiver 1, which is just a bigger advantage to your team.
Yep. I agree with you, Dalton. On that note, that is going to do it for episode 174 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube Half Point Per Podcast. The show is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify and Apple. Leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week. We're talking bus.
Let's go.